Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Hutchings?
Here.
Councilmember Ruffridge is not here yet. Councilmember Nelson?
Present.
Councilmember Carey?
Present.
Councilmember Chilson?
Present.
Councilmember Parker?
Present.
Student Representative Knowles?
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda? Mr. Carey.
Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda and the consent agenda as presented to us.
May I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chilson. Are there any changes to the agenda or consent agenda? Seeing none, will the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Approval of the October 27th, 2021 council meeting minutes. New business ordinances, ordinance 2021-24, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $51,694.54 in the COVID Relief Special Revenue Fund by accepting grant funds provided by the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services, introduced by the city manager, public hearing on December 1st, 2021. New business resolutions, Resolution 2021-55, in support of proposed Kenai Peninsula Borough Ordinance 2021-40, and ordinance amending KPB 2.40.015 regarding Planning Commission membership and apportionment, introduced by the Mayor and Councilmember Chilson. Resolution 2021-56, authorizing the purchase of a 2022 Ford F-350 one-ton pickup chassis in the amount of $38,122 from Kendall Ford of Anchorage. New Business Action Memorandum 2021-20, confirming the recommended candidates for appointment to the Kenai Peninsula Borough Planning Commission as the City of Soldotna representatives. Introduced by Councilmember Parker. Recommended appointees are Linda F. Hutchings and Paul J. Whitney. Action Memorandum 2021-21, approval of the 2022 City Council meeting schedule, brought to you by the City Clerk. And Informational Memorandum 2021-6, liquor license operating within the City of Soldotna, brought to you by the City Clerk. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on any of the items just read by the clerk? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand. If you would like to comment, app users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the audience? Mr. Cox, please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Tyson Cox, Soldotna.
I think, is that turned on?
I believe so. Is that good? I was coming to speak to ordinance 2021-40, or the resolution supporting 2021-40 for the Kenai Peninsula Borough. And I was mostly coming to just a little bit of background. Of course, you guys have some background with that as well. But the background that to share with you guys about that would be on the idea of the reason that Mr. Chesley and I brought that forward was there were specifically, and in our memo we talked about that, some questions to be answered. One of them is, the first one would be, how many members should there be, which really goes back to how many city members should there be, because if you're going to go to a lesser number, we would have a lesser number of city members, which means somebody would have to sit off each year. How would that happen? And we were just looking to give it a little bit of definition, because it seems like there isn't much definition to that. And then the next item was how many people are on a list, because there has been some discussion back and forth, specifically between Soldotna and the mayor's office. And so that gave us a great opportunity to help define what that is and what a list does mean in that particular case. And then we also wanted to define that a member from a city that would be on the Planning Commission would be a resident of that city. And so those were the questions that came up, and those are the ones that we'll be working on answering. We may or may not end up with the exact version of this resolution or this ordinance that we're bringing forward. But what we will have, and this is my hope, is we will have some answers, and we'll have a more defined idea of what is being asked of each city when they want to try and participate in the planning commission. And so I did want to share one thing, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I can, is when I went to Kenai City Council, they did have one question, and it was in, give me just a second. It was in the, when we're going back to the code, the 2.40.15 membership part of the code, in section B where it says, city seats, a city resident serving on a planning commission seat shall be selected by the mayor from a list of recommendations. That was being read. Councilmember Naxted was kind enough to show us that he was reading that as it would be coming specifically from their city planning commission. And so we wanted to be very clear. We didn't want to do this and have it end up being less clear than it was before. So we do have a amendment coming forward, and it's going to change it to only a city resident may serve on a city seat and shall be selected by the mayor. And so what it's going to do is clarify that to where it is very specific, because that was the intent. And so if you have any questions, I would be happy.
Are there any questions from the council? Go ahead, Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. So I haven't read the ordinance, but I am supportive. So you're going to continue to follow Alaska statute where we are required under the statute where the city council makes the recommendation and provides the mayor with the list of individuals to fill that seat. So that will still be in your ordinance?
Yes, if I may, in a nutshell, what it will do is it will change the planning commission to 13, so 5 designated seats for the cities, 8 at-large seats for the unincorporated areas. And what that would also say is that a list from the city, the city would get to select and send a list of applicants of at least one applicant to the mayor's office for approval, is how I believe it's read.
Okay. And if I might, with a follow-up comment, previously I served as planning director under Mayor Don Gilman and Mayor Mike Navarre, and during that time, the Planning Commission had representatives from all the incorporated communities on the Kenai Peninsula, and it was worked exceptionally well in getting the input from each of the communities, particularly when it came to issues before the Planning Commission that was impacting that community or adjacent to them was extremely beneficial. So I think having representatives on the Planning Commission from your incorporated communities is a good step to take. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a couple of comments. I was the last city member that sat on the Planning Commission until 2020. So I was there also when they changed the ordinance the first time to reduce it to 11. And I think one of the comments made during that period was that if they followed the statutes or followed the borough ordinances, they would have to increase that planning commission from the 13 members it was then to something like 15 because of proportions. So is that, you're still thinking with just the 13 members as it was before?
That is a discussion I've had with Mr. Kelly several times. We've talked about this, and he has assured me that going to 13 would suffice. It would be within the realm of what the state is asking for. The state is asking for approximately 2/3 from the unincorporated borough and about 1/3 from the cities. So to be exact, the more we have, up to 15 would be more accurate. But as far as having commission seats and having it be in a situation where it's enough people to suffice for the state, he firmly believes that that will be enough to accommodate what they're asking us to do.
And then just one other comment. It seemed, during my time frame on that, which was about 6 years, I believe, most of the cities or most of the communities or areas that did have representation, most of the time they only had one name that was ever submitted. It was usually whoever was already serving, or it was somebody new, and it was usually only just one.
If I may, that's definitely my argument as well for in the memo that I added with this. And I'm assuming that will be a discussion that comes up is why not have it 2 or more, which it very possibly could be set at 2 or more. That's just going to be my question is if it's set at 2 or more and you truly only get one from that city, how will we handle that? How will that be sent back to the city? How will that be discussed? I mean, it's a question we'll have to answer because you're right. Often only one is sent or one person is even volunteering.
And then I guess one other comment is, I believe it's the city that should advertise for that position, and that it definitely should be a city resident who's representing the city of Soldotna or city of Soldovia or whatever it might be. So that's my personal feelings.
And on the topic of whether it should be a resident or not, that was something, because we are the sponsors of it, Mr. Chesley and I both decided that that is something that we wanted to, both being members of a city, is, I would like my representative of my city that I live in to also be of that city. And so we both were of that feeling that it should be a person from the city. And if it wasn't clear enough in our borough code, we're hoping that now it will be clear enough that it needs to be an actual resident from that city. As far as advertising goes, I've left advertising out of this because as far as state code goes right now, it says that the city gets to pick. It doesn't say you have to choose a particular way to advertise that. It doesn't say that you have to have any guidance from the borough. What it says is that you as a city choose someone to send forward. So I left it open because I felt like that's a little bit too much oversight and that the city should have that right to decide who they send forward.
Any other questions from the council? Any comments? Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on anything on the consent agenda? And looking at the Zoom, I see no hands raised. So, having no one else wishing to speak, the approval of the agenda and consent agenda is back before the council. Are there any council objections to approving the agenda or the consent agenda? Seeing none, the agenda and consent agenda are approved. Moving on to the next item, would be item 4, presentation with prior notice. First one up will be Kenai Watershed Forum mini grant report by Megan Pike, Education Director of the Kenai Watershed Forum. Ms. Pike, you are on, and she will be attending by Zoom.
Hi there, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, all right, let me get my screen shared with you. Did the council have a chance to print out the slide deck that Breck would have sent your way?
Well, I know we have it in our packet.
You have it in your packet, great,
Yeah.
okay. And then can you see my presentation on your side? Just give me a thumbs up when you can see it on your screen.
We're seeing your presentation notes.
Oh, that's not what I want you to see. I want you to see this instead. Let's see. Escape. Let me unclip from the monitor. Okay, we'll try this instead. Sorry about that, guys. Share. You're still seeing that? Okay. Sorry about this. We'll go here. New share. This is what we want to share. We want to move into this, my friends. If you have it in your packet, we could move forward that way if it's not letting me share full screen. But I'd like for you to be able to see our slides. So just give me one more second. I thought maybe by attending virtually, we would have better luck with tech stuff, but maybe not. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. There, can you guys see that
There we
okay?
go.
We can see it this time.
Okay, thank you so much. Wonderful. Let's go into presentation mode. Fabulous. Okay, so hi, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council for having us here tonight. We're excited to share what our summer projects entailed. Our executive director is also on the line, Brandon Borneman, but I am Megan Pike, and I work here at the Kenai Watershed Forum in Soldotna. We're longtime proud partners of the city. We've worked with you guys on several projects in the past, and I've been here in this position for a number of years and gotten to work with you guys through our Kenai River Festival, our Stream Watch program, our Adopt a Stream program, as well as our annual summer camp. So we've been here a while, and we're happy to continue to do that. We are specifically speaking to our mini grant that we received through the city tonight. So our mini grant that we received for $500 was specifically to fund our pop-up summer camp program. And this pop-up program was a hands-on opportunity to youth on the Kenai Peninsula that was a little bit different than our annual and week-long summer camp program. So we achieved two goals of the City of Soldotna Comprehensive Plan through this mini grant, Goal 2 and Goal 11. So we were really able to enhance the outreach towards youth here in Soldotna, as well as some new initiatives towards arts, education, and culture through our pop-up program. So this mini grant project was kind of in lieu of the Kenai River Festival originally. So as you know, we had to cancel Kenai River Festival due to COVID again this year. And this pop-up program and mini grant really provided us a different opportunity to deliver environmental education to K to 6th grade families. We offered camps for 2 week-long sessions and 10 pop-up programs, and they were offered to the K to 6th grade families here in Soldotna. What made these camps different is they were standalone camps, so they weren't attached to any others. You could just come for one day, and they were offered either free to the community or through a scholarship, which was really a wonderful thing to be able to give to the area. So we worked with several community partners to host these guest lectures, and it was a pleasure. So this $500 funded 17 hours of my salary here to coordinate and register campers, work with partners, work with parents. So that time was used really valuably. I wanted to highlight for you just quickly some of the programs that happened right here in City of Soldotna's parks. So the first being our annual tree planting. It's our second year, and it was really a treasure to meet these 12 campers in Centennial Park. And some of them were returners, and they were able to come and check on their saplings from last year and then replant another 200 additional trees this year. So we partnered with the Kenai River Rotary on this one. They were our guest lecturer, and we met in the park and had a picnic and chatted about habitat and the invasive spruce bark beetle. So it was a really valuable day in Centennial Park. Our main summer camp program operates here in Soldotna Creek Park at our main office and at our adjacent yurt next to the office. So Soldotna Creek naturally gets a lot of attention through our education programs. Here you can see one of our camps down at Soldotna Creek, and they were collecting macroinvertebrates, checking on their juvenile salmon traps, and taking some water quality parameters right in our backyard, right? All in a day's work. So we feel pretty lucky to have this right behind our office and accessible to our camps. Lastly, it's worth mentioning this really invaluable tool and education perk that the City of Soldotna and the Soldotna Library put into Soldotna Creek Park this year. So here you can see our camp. It's our pop-up stream studies camp going through the story walk. I kindly asked Leslie at City of Soldotna's library to showcase one of my favorite salmon education books for this pop-up camp. And she graciously agreed. So we read our story through the trails and we meandered down to the creek, and we actually got to end by checking our juvenile salmon traps, which in most places in the world is an environmental education scenario that is made of dreams, right? Like this is a perfect. We read the story, we ended it with some hands-on ed. So I really really valued this story walk that we got to participate in. I also wanted to just briefly point out that our pop-up camps and our week-long camps are just a glimpse into what KWF provides for watershed education through the community. So we've been operating our Adopt a Stream program for over 25 years here in Soldotna and in the Kenai Peninsula Borough. We visit schools monthly to monitor streams nearby schools. So Soldotna Creek and Slycott Creek are frequent flyers there. And we do some watershed education throughout the year. So we really have valued being in this community for over a decade, and we've had a chance to provide around 55,000 hours of education so far. And this is in progress again this year, which we're excited about. I know we had a short period of time to share, so I wanted to wrap up in case anybody had any questions, but truly the City of Soldotna is a huge partner to us, and this mini grant was just the beginning of this pop-up program. So thank you for seeing our vision and continuing to support us at the Watershed Forum.
Are there any questions or comments from the council? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. And thank you, Megan, for the presentation on how you spent the mini grant and the programs that you offer here in our community and with our kids. So you mentioned Kenai River Festival. Are you looking at having a Kenai River Festival in 2022?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. We are anxiously and enthusiastically having River Festival in June of 2022. And the dates for that festival will be June 10th through the 12th, 2022.
Mr. Carey.
Thank you for all the work that you're doing and that the entire watershed community does. Do you anticipate applying for another mini grant for this coming year?
I would say yes. Yeah, we worked with Breck really closely. Thank you, Breck. She was a great resource to us, and you guys continue to support us that way. So I do foresee that we'll apply again.
Excellent. And I hear 55,000 hours. That's awesome. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Pike, for your presentation and all you do for the community and our river.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Next up will be the Kenai Peninsula Homelessness Coalition Strategic Plan Update, be presented by Tim Navarre, Leslie Rohr, and Kathy Gensel.
And you guys can just bring your chairs up with you if you want to join in.
That's right. I think we'll split it up. We'll just let somebody jump up. Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Tim Navarre, and I'll be the first of the three to make a presentation. First, I want to make sure that I'm kind of the head of the IT, and I'm going to do it. We decided to do it in face-to-face because I'm not good at technology. No. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you to the City of Soldotna. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the City of Soldotna in this particular case. Your city manager's leadership and your planner, and even Justin participated in those meetings early on. They called some of us up and we came together for a meeting. Otherwise, I'd have been doing other things. I had other plans on my calendar to do things, and they really wanted to see what City of Soldotna could do and help us with some grants and participate some way in helping with that issue. And it kind of motivated us, and by talking, and they agreed to meet week after week after week, which, because we kept saying, can we meet next week? Can we meet next week? I think after 6 weeks we were off and running, and but I don't want to understate, because Stephanie and John keep sending information to us that's important. Build to Zero, which you'll hear about, and an article from the municipal government's thing. Just the other day, our consultant, Denali Daniels, or just today, a matter of fact, I think the deputy planner sent us a program on data and how, we're just enthralled by all that participation. And so, without a doubt, the City of Soldotna gets credit for us being here today. And I also, as I've told in most of the presentations, we're actually going to have a cold weather shelter, an emergency shelter open before the end of this year. And we feel very proud. And again, if we weren't meeting and being engaged, I think would have missed that opportunity or been able to be organized to be able to jump on it. So again, thank you to the leadership of the city of Soldotna for this time of year, for the time of year back in June to get it going. So I have to say that. And anyway, the coalition is a combination of Continuum of Care group that's already been existing a number of years. It includes the Homeless Connect group. It includes anybody else that's wanted to participate. The cities, the boroughs are all part of the Continuum of Care already, but the coalition has just grown. And we decided to put together the draft plan and then go to the public, especially in today's virtual world of not being able to gather and do strategic plans the normal way. So with that, I'm going to turn over, we're going to go over the data real quick, so I'm going to let Leslie Rohr come up, and we'll end with Kathy.
Thank you again for allowing us to be here. And I do want to say it was April 14th when I spoke at the city council meeting about this very subject. And when we look at, in your packet, you have some data sheets, and there's one, the unique client counts for the Kenai Peninsula in 2019. When you see emergency shelter there, that really should be emergency lodging, as in motel beds, hotel beds. We had 59 in that year that we were able to provide. Homeless prevention, we were able to serve 649 individuals to prevent them from becoming homeless, and 300 individuals were placed into permanent housing from homelessness. 376 individuals received services that may have included some prevention or some emergency lodging, but they weren't ready to go into housing. The line graph on the next page goes over the point in time count from Homeless Connect, starting with 2017. You'll see, of course, with COVID, our numbers of unsheltered homeless went up. The number of people we were able to put into hotels went down, and the number of people seeking the transitional housing covers recovery housing and mental health housing. So those services went up during the pandemic. Next slide shows the total. And keep in mind, these are just rough numbers because not everybody reports into this. So we have a total of at least 874 people that were identified in 2019 as being homeless on the Kenai Peninsula. The next slide is the primary reasons for homelessness, and I just like to point out that substance abuse is clear down at 4%. It's not the big number that everyone expects for it to be. And then the last data slide is the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District numbers. And at any number, it's too many, but when you look at the number of children that experience homelessness in our community, it's way too much. And I will turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm Kathy Gensel from Soldotna. And again, thank you to the city of Soldotna for the little kick in the rear end to say, hey, we've got to do something. So we are almost to the end of our strategic plan. We are now at the part where we want to ask the community to join us. And so I believe you all have a flyer. So this next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we will be having community discussions, all virtual via Zoom. Monday will be the Southern Peninsula area. Tuesday then is the central area, Kenai Soldotna. Seward, or not Seward, Sterling, Cooper Landing areas. Wednesday will be the eastern area, and then Thursday will cover the whole borough. So if you can't make it to the one on Tuesday, you're more than welcome to join the other ones. You can register at KenaiPeninsulaHomeless.org, and they'll send you the Zoom invite for that. But like I said, we're to the point now where we want the community's input and feedback. We will be showing the draft strategic plan at that time and some other, exciting things that are going on. So we encourage all of you, send it out to email groups that you have, church groups, social groups, whatever you've got. We want to have plenty of community discussions. So again, thank you to the City of Soldotna. I don't know that we would be where we are now if you guys hadn't pushed us along. So thank you very much. And any questions?
Any questions or comments? Vice Mayor Parker?
Thank you. I always have questions because that's how I learn. So thank you so much for the presentation and for taking the initiative to keep this moving and keep this going. So on your community discussions, Tyonek, Nanwalek, and Port Graham, are you going to be reaching out to them to let them know about these community discussions? So if they chose to be part?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And then the cold weather shelter is going to open this winter. Do we know where that's going to be?
Well, at this point in time, we're waiting until next Wednesday to hear from Rasmussen. We've applied for a grant to pay for half of a building. The other half of the building, we already have a grant from SERI that has been approved. So next Wednesday, hopefully we will know. And yes, we will definitely announce it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Mr. Cholson?
I'd just like to also say thank you for all the work that's gone into this project, and I'm excited to see that you guys are well underway on the development of a strategic plan. I think that's going to be essential for opening up further grant opportunities. And I was just curious if you could provide a little light on the timeline you'd expect to see with that development of that plan moving forward. Obviously, the community discussion is going to be a pillar that you build on, but where do you see that going from that point forward?
I think the plan was initially that we would have the strategic plan by Thanksgiving. That's probably been pushed back to maybe the second week in December or something like that. And then obviously once we have that plan, we'll be able to work on the strategies that come out of that.
Excellent. Look forward to
We're
seeing
excited, but we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
it. Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work on that.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, thank you very much, and especially for everything you do for the homeless.
Thank you.
I think we have a lot more around here than people really realize, and they need help. All right, next item on the agenda is Alaskans for Better Elections. Jason Gren, Executive Director of the Nonpartisan Alaskan for Better Elections Foundation.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. As Mayor Whitney indicated, my name is Jason Gren. I'm the Executive Director for Alaskans for Better Elections, which is a nonprofit group that is working independently but in tandem with the Division of Elections to work with all Alaskans and inform all Alaskan voters regarding the election changes coming to our state elections in August and November of 2022. Short introduction of myself. I'm a fourth-generation lifelong Alaskan who is raising 3 kids in Anchorage, in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and was able to serve in the Alaska State Legislature as an independent representative in the state house. And my work now is to work with and talk to and present to and listen to all Alaskans as we work to inform them about the new election system coming to our state next year. Ballot Measure 2 in 2020 passed. It was a citizens initiative and passed with a majority of vote from Alaskan voters. And it had several changes to our Alaska election law, but 2 of the major election changes I'd like to talk to you tonight. A longer presentation that I can give tonight was shared to council members and I believe is online. and also a quick one sheet that explains one of the major changes. Ranked choice voting was also presented to council members and is available online. Happy to answer questions along my discussion tonight, but also can wait until the end if that's preferred. Great. As mentioned, several changes to our Alaska election system are coming in 2022. One of them is focused on how campaign contributions are made public. Another one is how governor and lieutenant governors run together in our Alaska elections. But the two changes I'd like to talk about tonight are both our new open primary system and our ranked choice voting general election system. Our primary system in Alaska for the past 20 years has been something that's been more closely aligned to a closed primary system. As a Republican or a Democrat or an independent voter, you would go to your ballot location, your voting location, and choose one of two ballots. Coming in August of 2022, that will no longer be the case. Regardless of your party affiliation as a voter and regardless of party affiliation as a candidate, you will receive one ballot, and all candidates will be on said ballot. So if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you no longer have to choose what ballot you would like to use in that primary election system at a statewide level. And if you're a candidate running for a statewide election, you would be on the same ballot as everyone else. As a voter, you will be voting for one person in each race. So in a state Senate, state House, gubernatorial, U.S. Senate, U.S. Representative, those races, you would choose one candidate. You would select one candidate to vote for. And the top four vote getters said from the primary election will move on to the general election. Open primaries have a history here in Alaska. Up until the year 2000, Alaska voters were pretty used to having an open primary system. So this is basically moving back to what Alaska had for a very long time. It's also very similar to what other states use around the United States. Upwards of 30 different states have an open primary system, and the states of California and Washington have something similar to what we'll be using. They have a top 2 nonpartisan election system. We will be using a top 4 nonpartisan election system in our primaries. So from there, as I mentioned, the top 4 vote getters in the primary system will be moving on to the general election. Obviously, if there's only 2 or 3 candidates in a primary system, all of them, regardless of the amount of votes that they receive in the primary, they will move on to the general election. But if there's 5, 6, 7 candidates running in a primary election, the top 4 vote getters, regardless of their party affiliation, will move on to the general election. So in a general election next year, next November, you could see 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat running in one race, two of each party, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, 1 independent, 1 Green Party, perhaps, in the election. But as a voter, again, regardless of your party affiliation, when the general election comes, we'll all receive the same ballot, and we will be using something called ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting has been used in Australia for the past 100 years. It's used in Ireland. It's used in Scotland, a number of countries around the world. And it's actually used in almost 50 cities around the United States. Many states use it for their military and overseas voters to make sure that their ballots are counted in time. And other states, like Maine, are using it at a statewide level. And many cities are now using it as a cost-effective manner to use instant runoff systems and to increase voter participation. But Alaska is the first state that will be using both an open primary and a ranked choice general election in the same year. So with ranked choice voting as a voter, regardless of your party affiliation, as I've mentioned, you will receive 1 ballot, and you will rank up to 4 candidates with your preference. 1, 2, 3, 4. We do this every day in our life. I use a coffee shop example because it's happened to me many times. If I go to a coffee shop and I think that I want a chocolate croissant, but they don't have the chocolate croissant, was my second choice. My second choice is the regular croissant. Well, they're out of that as well. My third choice now is a muffin. I'm still happy with the muffin. It wasn't my first or second choice, but now I at least I'm receiving something that my stomach will be happy with, and hopefully as a voter, my heart and my mind can be happy too, at least voting and showing support for different candidates in different ways. But with ranked choice voting, you will use a 1, 2, 3, 4 preference system. There is room for a write-in as well if you choose to do so. But ranked choice voting, the ranking from a voter standpoint is very simple. Sometimes the tabulation system is where a lot of questions get asked. If in that first round, no candidate receives 50% of the first round votes, the last place candidate is eliminated from the ballot tabulation, and that candidate's votes are then distributed to the other three candidates who are still in the race. And so it's important from a voter standpoint to make sure that you rank as many candidates as you would like, because it still provides you the opportunity to show support for said candidate and also be involved with the ballot tabulation up until the end, where one candidate would receive 50%. As I mentioned, this is a new shift to Alaska's election. It's a new shift in terms of what happens in both the primary and the general election. And really, from a national standpoint, it's the first time in United States history where this sort of election system is happening. So our work, as I mentioned, working with the division elections, is to inform voters and work with all voters really from around the state to make sure that when they go to vote next August and November, that they feel confident and hopefully inspired by this system to use it effectively. We understand that there's misinformation and sometimes not a lot of information around these systems. And so what we ask for is when we present with groups and meet with people, I had the opportunity today to meet with several different groups in the Kenai-Saldana area. And we can't do this work alone. The division elections and ourselves have limited manpower, limited resources, but our goal to reach every Alaskan also counts on community leaders such as yourself, organizations that you're a part of, Rotaries, Chamber of Commerce's, civic organization, churches, community councils, any group that you're a part of, to know where the best information can come from and to engage with us and to help us reach all voters across the state, and so that we're ready for these elections to be both implemented successfully and from a voter standpoint done as well as possible. So the Vision Elections is a fantastic website. They have sample ballots of these new elections. They have videos, a tremendous amount of FAQs and different ways that people can learn, different resources that people can train from. And then our group, as a nonpartisan nonprofit, we have information as well to help train candidates, to help train city officials, to get the information out in the best way possible. So I said 10 minutes sometimes can be a limited amount of time to talk about these new systems, but hopefully we've conveyed at least an overview that the state of Alaska and ourselves are ready to engage with people and listen to people about getting this information the best way possible. So with that said, Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned, happy to answer any questions or provide more information.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the council? Mr. Carey.
Thank you, and pleased to hear what you're doing as a government teacher for 30 years and then 10 years at the College on Political Science. Would you share with us what you believe are the strengths of this system?
Yes, Councilmember Carey, I appreciate the question. We're obviously advocates for this system because we believe that these benefits will, one, it's very voter focused. This is a voter-driven initiative, and for us, voters are who need to have the power when it comes to elections, and not candidates and not political parties. And so that this puts the onus on voters to engage with all of the candidates, learn about the candidates, knowing that they need to rank them in a preference as opposed to a binary choice when it comes to just choosing one party or the other. And so hopefully that sort of interaction with candidates keeps them engaged on different policies, different options for solutions that they're to problems that they're interested in. And then from a candidate standpoint, many jurisdictions that use ranked choice voting have found that it decreases negative advertising. It also increases the way that candidates have to interact with voters. If you are in a Democratic district and you are running as a Democrat, there's a history that shows that you feel like you might not have to reach other voters outside of your base. Now with ranked choice voting, it's incredibly important to build a coalition of second and third place votes to make sure that you receive a majority. So you no longer can avoid voters who are not in your base or don't have your party affiliation. So you have to send them a mailer, knock on their door, have a conversation, talk about policy. And so as a community, the hope there is that you have elected leaders who are listening in a different way, and going to Juneau with a majority support of their district, and not relying solely on appealing to their base, but also appealing to their entire district of voters. Ranked choice voting in different ways, as I mentioned, it both increases the satisfaction of voters because they can share preference, and maybe if their first place candidate loses, they've shown support in another way. And from a candidate, it allows them to engage with voters in a different way. And so it hopefully is a win-win from a voter and a candidate standpoint. Thus, that combined solutions moving the state forward in a positive way that shows both compromise and listening to solutions, not just from a particular party.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And good work on this.
Thanks, sir.
Any other questions from the council? Mr. Ruffridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Gren, for your work on this. I'm sure it's quite a challenging adventure, but I appreciate your efforts on that. One of the things we heard sort of leading up to the election, and maybe some of the more negative elements about this thing was, one, how are you funded as a nonprofit? And then two, sort of what role, does your organization play? I know, nonpartisan and educational, all of those sorts of things. I know if you could just speak to some of those things that maybe the naysayers have to say, and maybe get that out as well as to why those may be incorrect, or maybe what you have to say to that.
No, thank you for the question, Councilmember Ruffridge. As a 501c3, C4 that is incorporated, obviously, and applied through the state of Alaska. Our staff, our board of directors, our volunteers are all Alaskans. Our funding, a little over 90% actually comes from outside organizations who are interested in election reform. Alaska, there's not many nonprofits or foundations or groups that are able to fund at the level of resources that we need to promote something like this. It's just kind of the way of our state. It's something we're working on, working with Rasmussen groups, working with different community foundation and individuals to increase the amount of our fundraising that happens in state. But about 90% of our fundraising comes from out-of-state entities. And we understand that obviously there's a negative connotation that comes from that. As Alaskans, as I mentioned, fourth generation Alaskan, very proud of who we are and what we do and making sure something happens in state. And I sometimes refer to it as, if I wanted to open up a surf shop in Yakutat, well, 20 years ago, people would thought that was pretty crazy. And your in-state funding might not have happened. But people who have good ideas, they shop that around. They look for people who want to invest in that. And in our case, currently, anyways, a lot of that funding comes from out of state. Your second question regarding, I apologize.
Oh, no, that's okay. Just sort of those other elements where people would say, well, this is, against the law, or, some of the things that you just hear loudly sometimes. I think this is a super positive change and comes at a very excellent time considering the division that we see in our current political climate. And I'm interested to see how it rolls out. Yeah, just some of those things where, elections are becoming a very challenging subject. And so I didn't know what some of those things are that you guys are doing to combat some of those, negative elements.
Sure, and I think again, the ballot measure passed with a very, very slight margin, and so we know that just the issue itself and the idea itself can be polarizing, and we take that very seriously. And again, that's why our group, you'll find in Alaska's history when it comes to state initiatives, many of those groups dissolve after they win or lose said election. And our group, knowing that it was going to take a tremendous amount of education and working with communities to inform people about how to do it correctly and how to implement it correctly, decided to create a new C3 and C4 so we could stick around basically and do things like this and present and meet people where they are and go to different communities You know, as a former elected official, you know, I was a nonpartisan, non-affiliated member of the House. And so I take that nonpartisan role very seriously in terms of just informing people and looking at data, looking at the analysis of how something works or how doesn't it work. And I think, you know, we will meet groups that are skeptical. We meet with groups that are proponents of this change. And what we do is just share analysis from other jurisdictions, see how it works. You know, the motivating factor for our group during the campaign and now is, you know, are we happy with the status quo of what happens in Juneau? And, you know, what is the bottleneck in terms of finding solutions? And we understand that that's not for everyone. Some people are happy with what's happening in Juneau. Some people are incredibly disappointed with what's happening in Juneau. But as Alaskans, just trying to find a new path towards solutions and changing the incentive for elected officials as opposed to punishing them for compromise, punishing elected officials for working together, finding ways that that's a positive thing. Because I think as Alaskans, we are more solutions-oriented. We are more people-oriented than political party-oriented. 63% of Alaskans are nonpartisan registered voters. They've chosen not to be part of a party. We take that to mean people want, you know, solutions, not slogans, basically, when it comes to the work that happens in our state capital. And so is it very happy to meet with people who are skeptical or people who believe this to be something in the wrong direction and just have a civil, normal debate and talk through, you know, our reasons and listen. At the end of the day, for us, this is the law of the land. And if the speed limit changes to 65 and you just start putting up the new signs that say, hey, the speed limit's 65, you may hate it, you may love it, but that's the law of the land. That's what we're trying to do, is just inform Alaskans about these changes so that then when they vote next year, they know how to do it correctly and they can use it to their own benefit.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate that.
Any other questions from the council? Mr. Chilson?
I'd just like to say thank you for coming out tonight and all your work on this. I'm pretty excited to see this moving forward. I think we've all been frustrated by the increasing polarization in politics at all levels in the last couple of years. And I think one of the patterns that's becoming more common is through these elections, we often end up with, you know, two really gargantuan candidates on, you know, one side and the other of the spectrum that have a lot of PAC funding them. And as a voter, it can be really frustrating when, okay, I'm presented with these two large candidates, but maybe I want to vote for someone that's somewhere in the middle, like you said, that might be nonpartisan, but, you know, they might not have the funding base to really compete with that person. And as a voter in the established system, you know, when I'm looking at those choices, I have the two large candidates and maybe that third candidate. If I decide I want to go for them, I might be knowing that I'm wasting my vote because they don't have a chance. And so I vote for one of the two candidates that I might not necessarily like or support, but that's just the way the system's operated. Well, there might be a lot more people than we realize out there that have that same mentality, and if they're willing to make that vote because they realize it might not be wasted with this new ranked system, I think we can see some positive change hopefully come out of this. So thank you for all your work.
Yes, if I can address that, Councilmember Chilson, ranked choice voting allows for, I think, nuance in any sort of policy debate, and having third and fourth candidates running without what you've mentioned is wasting a vote or vote splitting or that spoiler effect. We see that in three-way races quite often. Alaska hasn't elected a U.S. Senator since 2002 to have received 50% of the vote. And it's because we always run generally third or fourth candidates. Now, with ranked choice voting, whoever we send to D.C. or whoever we send to Juneau will have that 50% plus majority support because of how the system is set up. But it also allows many jurisdictions with ranked choice voting find that people of color run, more women run, people who felt disengaged with a political party because they've told to wait, or they're told not to run because they don't want to split a vote with an incumbent or with someone in that party. But now it allows for more voices without, as you mentioned, wasting a vote or splitting a vote in fear of of incumbent losing or someone who's in a powerful position losing, but still having people run and having voters show support. And so I think, the goal obviously with that is that more people turn out, they feel inspired to vote and show support in different ways. And so, again, this is in a lot of ways academic and in theory. And you mentioned your excitement for next year. I'm both excited and anxious myself, and I think as we do presentations and work with many groups across the state, that sentiment exists with most people.
Exactly. Yeah. We're empowering voters, and we shouldn't ever be in a position where our voters feel like they can't vote in what they believe, vote for what they believe in because that person doesn't have an R or a D. So, thank you.
Mr. Carey.
Just to follow up, am I correct to assume that if you, on a ballot, if you mark 2 as your third choice, would that throw out that race? If you had a first, second, and then 2 that I said were thirds, so I put 2, would that throw out that vote?
Councilmember Carey, if I'm hearing this right, if you gave you're allowed to give 1 vote to each candidate. If you give 3 votes or 2 votes to the same candidate, it does not help them in additional ways.
No, so if on the cross I pick my first, and then I pick my second, and then I pick those 2 totally different people, both as my third, would that throw that ballot out?
Correct. It's first place gets one candidate, second place gets one candidate, third place gets one candidate, fourth place gets one candidate. Your ballot counts if you just choose 1 or 2
right.
or 3 or 4, but you're not able to kind of push out more votes to any one candidate. And sorry if I'm misunderstanding.
You're doing fine, and the real question I'm asking, would you anticipate that particularly as people are becoming educated on this, there will initially be more ballots thrown out than, I'll say, normally, whatever normally is?
Sure, and that's a great question. New York City ran their mayor's race with ranked choice voting, and they found actually less spoiled ballots than they have had in the past, meaning less invalid ballots happened because they had a great voter education standpoint, and really it's intuitive to kind of, to most people go, 1 person, 1 vote, and kind of mark it across and figure that out. As I mentioned, the divisional elections has sample ballots out now. They're pushing those out in different ways. We're doing education. Our goal is that every voter knows how to fill out the ballot correctly as they wish, because we don't want their ballot to be spoiled or for them to feel like they were tricked or manipulated into not maximizing the benefits of the ballot. So, as I mentioned, 1 candidate, 1 vote, that continues. And if you only choose to vote for 1, it's still valid, and up to 4 you can vote for.
Thank you. And again, for the work you're doing.
Any other questions, Vice Mayor Parker?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Thank you, Mr. Grin, for coming and making the presentation tonight. To follow up with Councilmember Carey's question, so if I ended up voting for my first and my second, and I inadvertently marked 2 for a third place, do 1 and 2 count, but then 3 is thrown out?
That's correct.
So my vote will count for the first and second choice, but my number 3 doesn't count.
That's correct. You can imagine either a software wouldn't be able to distribute that vote, or a hand counter wouldn't know where that third place goes because you've marked two candidates at that point. It would be invalid at that point, that round anyways. But the first 2 rounds would count just as they normally would. It's working with the division elections. It's amazing that we find voting probably to be intuitive. We mark 1 person or you bubble it in. The ballots that they get, people circling a name or, circling the bubble but not filling it in. There's a number of ways that people think they're voting, but they invalidate their own ballot. And that's why the division elections right now is working with national experts on how to create the best ballot, how to create a poster that explains it in each voting booth. There's a tremendous amount of work going into this. We're a year out, and we're doing this work now so that Alaskans know how to do this correctly, because we do want every voter, again, regardless of how they feel about the system, to feel very confident that they know how to use the system when they go vote next August and November. So hopefully this time next year. We don't get many stories of people marking a ballot like that, but that's why this work is happening right now.
Any other questions? I have a couple of comments and then a couple of questions also. I can remember when we had the open primary, and I thought that was the best thing that we ever had. I hated to see it go. The other thing is, talking about fundraising, you take a look at some of the candidates that are running today, most of their fundraising is done outside the state of Alaska also. We just saw one, it's going to have one in Florida, and others are doing all over the country. So one of my questions is, write-ins, how are those handled? And are they permitted on the primary and in the general?
They are. There is a space, Mr. Mayor, there is a space for a write-in in both the primary and the general. Obviously, in the primary, very simple, write it in, vote for them, that one vote, just like you normally would. In the ranked choice voting general, when you write them in, you would be allowed to vote for them in any of the preferred spots 1 through 4, in addition to the other 4 candidates. Write-ins obviously have an interesting history in our Alaska elections, and so that was definitely something we made sure was possible, that people could still produce a write-in candidate if wanted.
And my other question is, you said once someone doesn't have the 50%, and then you go down and you drop one of them, and those votes are distributed, how is that determined, how that distribution will take place?
Sure. So if there's 4 candidates in that first round of voting, no candidate has received 50%. The last place candidate is eliminated from the race. Their second place, whoever ranked Mr. Steve Johnson, who's now eliminated, his second place votes are now distributed to the other 3 candidates who are still, and it's added to their vote total. So if the candidates 1 through 3 have received 35, 30, and 25%, and Mr. Steve Johnson, who's now eliminated, his votes are, the second place votes have been distributed to the other 3 candidates, it adds to their vote total. So now it might, instead of 35, 30, and 25, it might be 38, 33, and 26. My math is off on there. It's off the cuff. I apologize.
His votes would be distributed according to the percentage of votes the other ones received?
No, that last place, whoever. So if I voted for Mr. Whitney, first place, and then I voted for Steve Johnson in second place, when Steve Johnson is eliminated, everyone who voted for Steve Johnson's second place votes, those second place votes, those numbers, the number of ballots are distributed, however they were voted for in his ballot, are distributed to the other 3 candidates. I apologize for not having a visual. Sometimes the visual helps a lot, but if 100 people voted for Steve Johnson, and then when he's eliminated, his 100 votes, they look at those ballots and say, okay, who gave Steve Johnson second place votes? So second place, they voted for Mr. Whitney, they voted for Mr. James, they voted for Ms. Smith. However number of second place votes are assigned to each candidate are then distributed to them in their vote total count.
Sounds a little complicated. Fortunately, I'm sure there's going to be a computer that'll figure it out.
No, the software that is used is very transparent. You can actually kind of watch it get distributed. And as I mentioned, I apologize for not having a video or a sheet in front of me that kind of shows that round by round. The one pager that I believe I sent to the council that is available online does show in a very brief way how it's done. But again, as part of our education information process, as a visual learner or someone who wants to be an interactive type of learner like myself, it's so much easier when we are able to do this at the brewery or a coffee shop or a restaurant to kind of show people how it gets distributed, and that's part of our work, because it is sometimes tough to kind of mentally see without a nice visual.
Now, this only applies to state elections, and does it apply to the national elections when we hold them?
The president, yes, it does. So your state house, state senator, U.S. Senate, U.S. representative, governor, and presidential elections.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation, and we'll be seeing you next week.
Yes, and hopefully we'll have a video there and we can talk more. But again, thank you for the opportunity. And the information that I sent has contact information if other people have questions. So appreciate it a lot.
All right,
Thank you.
very much. Moving along to the next item on the agenda is public comments and presentations. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? For those participating by Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone in the audience? Mr. Cox.
Tyson Cox, Soldotna. As I've been going around to talk about that ordinance, I've also been going around to share other information, and this is mostly a reminder for folks that if they would like some entertainment this Friday, there are a couple things going on. One of them is All Together Now Dinner Theater, Triumphant is putting on. It'll be Friday at 6 p.m. at Kenai Catering. It's going to be a 5-course meal with some great entertainment. The seats are $90 per person. It is a fundraiser to help with the rebuild of their theater. And $90, pretty good price when I know there's some pretty talented entertainment there. I know a specific 12-year-old that'll be there. So the other thing that's going on, and you guys may have heard about it already because it's just, the Soldotna Chamber is putting it on, is Friday as well. Spark Soldotna is putting on the Shark Tank event that happened, I think it was 2 years ago in 19. That's also on Friday at 5:30. That is at the Lone Moose Lodge, catering by the Hearth Eatery, and that will be $50 a ticket. And I will be there. My wife will be at the other one because I'll be helping judge that event, which will be a fun job. And then as a side note is Mr. Gren was at the high school today because I got to hear all about this earlier today when Quinn came home from school. So he is making his rounds and getting to everyone. So thank you, and I hope to see some of you at some of these events.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Have a great night.
I see no hands raised, and I see no one else in the audience wishing to speak. So we'll move on to Assembly and Legislative Report. And there is a representative from the borough here, and that's Mr. Cox. I don't know if he wanted to add anything under Assembly and Legislative Report. None? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Administrative Reports. All-purpose vehicles on public roadways. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I wanted to put this on the agenda as an update to let the council know that we are aware of the change at the state level regarding all-purpose vehicles on roadways 45 miles an hour and under, and to let you know that we have asked our city attorney to review our existing code. They've done that, and as you're aware, the city prohibits the use of ATVs on roads. They're allowed to cross roadways in certain circumstances, and our attorneys have determined that that existing set of regulations and our ability to enforce that section of code will remain in effect. So essentially, our city code is robust, it is properly articulated, and that when the change at the statewide level goes into effect on January 1, if the council chooses to do nothing, it will be status quo in terms of what's happening inside our city limits. We did, the chief had identified, raised a question really with our attorney about, what happens kind of on our boundaries, and we've got some boundaries that follow roadways and such. I did get an email back from the chief of staff of the borough, and they did confirm what I suspected, which is that there are no existing restrictions borough-wide, and the borough lacks police authority, police powers. Therefore, if there was to be some consideration of enacting that within the borough, for example, if the assembly were to take that issue up, there would have to be a discussion about an enforcement mechanism, and that may look like partnering with municipalities or I think the troopers were reached out to in the recent article in the newspaper. That would be a conversation that would involve other agencies. So I'm not aware of any movement at this time, but I wanted to at least share with you what we learned in reaching out to the other agencies. I spoke to the other city managers, with the exception of Seldovia, where they greatly encourage the use of ATVs on their roads. The other 4 municipalities on this side of the bay have similar provisions in their code. So Soldotna is like Homer, Kenai, and Seward in terms of what's existing on our books. We had reached out to our police departments, gathering input, and I can tell you there's mixed feelings on whether this is going to be a new opportunity that many people embrace, or whether it may not turn out to be that there are a lot of vehicles on the roads. But I just wanted to give you that update, allow it to be on the agenda for discussion and potentially answering questions. And with that, I'll conclude my report. Thank you, Mayor Whitney.
Are there any questions for the administration? I just have a comment. When I was working in law enforcement, my specialty was accident investigation and reconstruction, and investigated many accidents. And I just see this as allowing a 4-wheel drive or all-terrain vehicle on the highway at 45 miles an hour, or going through an intersection when somebody runs the red light. It's going to be a pretty bad accident. And I definitely don't favor having that within the city limits, because it can be very serious. So just my comments. Moving on to next item on the agenda is public hearings. Ordinance 2021-023, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $100,000 in the COVID-19 Relief Special Revenue Fund for grant funds provided by the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services, introduced by the city manager. Mr. Ruffridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to declare a possible conflict with Ordinance 2021-023, as I'm one of the principal owners of the Inlet Pharmacy Group that does business as Soldotna Professional Pharmacy, and the recipient of allocated funds through a sub-recipient agreement.
Thank you. Conflict does exist, and Councilmember Ruffridge will abstain from discussion and voting on Ordinance 2021-023. May I have a motion to enact? Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the adoption of Ordinance 2021-023, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $100,000 in the COVID-19 Relief Special Revenue Fund.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chilson. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. This ordinance we brought forward for consideration. It's for an existing grant that was awarded to the city, and it was specifically tailored at meeting vaccination and testing needs within the state of Alaska. And for the city's original proposal for this grant, we proposed to work with a private entity. We reached out to several to see who had the capacity and interest to open up essentially a walk-in clinic, and we were trying to make it as easy as possible for area residents who wanted to be vaccinated to have that opportunity to do so at a time and way that was convenient for them. The original funding amount was set by formula, so we were just determined to be allowed to have the original $195,000 from the state. And in speaking with a coalition of agencies in the area that included Public Health, CES and the borough, Nikiski Fire, Kenai Fire, as we were planning for boosters to become available in the fall, several months ago, we had conversations about whether we could potentially staff up, increase hours, increase numbers of staff to add additional capacity at the walk-in clinic when boosters came online and vaccination for children was available. And we reached out to the state, asked them whether additional funds would be available. They had identified that an additional $100,000 could be awarded to the city. If the council approves this ordinance, it would allow us to essentially amend our existing grant agreement to accept an additional $100,000. And then at the state's suggestion, it would also amend the end date of the grant, extending it through the end of FY23, so through June 30th, 2023. We didn't know that that was an option when the original grant was provided to us, but they have that flexibility, and they encouraged us to do that amendment. So that's the second part of what this would do is extend that end date. That really gives us a lot of flexibility. The city is not required to expend all these funds in the way we're currently doing it. So if at some point in the future that need is no longer there, we would be able to work with the state and potentially propose a different use that's still in line with the purpose of the funds and the eligibility. But it gives us the opportunity to meet that need if it exists. And I'd be happy to answer questions, but thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Public hearing is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone here in the audience that wishes to comment on this item? Seeing none, looking at the Zoom, I see no hands raised. No one else wishing to speak. The item is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Call for the vote. Oh, I'll go ahead, Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you. Do we know approximately how many additional vaccines we would be able to administer with the additional appropriation?
Thank you, Councilwoman Parker, through the mayor. I'd be happy to get that information, but I will tell you that with the existing grant amount and the current staffing level, we thought we could run the clinic through March. With this additional funding, we can either extend it longer beyond that time frame, or we can add staff and hours. Currently, previously the clinic had been operating Monday through Friday. This will give the ability to add a weekend and also to extend the times during the days. So really it's about adding hours and access, or lengthening the amount of time we can run it. And I will follow up after the meeting and get some information about how many vaccines have already been distributed to the clinic, as well as provide the council with an update on the expanded staffing and hours that are in place currently. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, call for the vote.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Carey?
Yes?
Councilmember Chilson?
Yes.
Councilmember Parker? Yes. Councilmember Hutchings?
Yes.
Student Representative Knowles?
Yes.
You have 5 yes votes and 1 abstention.
Ordinance 2021-023 passes on a 5-0 vote. Moving on to new business, resolutions. Resolution 2021-054, amending the City of Soldotna mini grant program policy, introduced by Council Members Ruffridge and Vice Mayor Parker. May I have a motion to adopt? Mr. Ruffridge.
I would move to adopt Resolution 2021-054.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Parker. Report from Council Members Ruffridge and Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During our last sessions with the mini grant review team, it was recognized that there were some changes that were needed to the mini grant program in order to get back to maybe the initial intent of that program, and you'll see some of the changes in the packet. The two that really were major changes would be to remove projects so that we could maybe further define that this was to be for an event or a service or something, rather than renovations or acquisitions or expansions of property and things of that nature. The second item, just in the interest of keeping this a small grant for somebody, for a small organization or an individual who is trying to offer a service that has great community benefit, is limiting organizations with budgets that exceed $100,000 will not be eligible to apply for the mini grant. The City of Soldotna certainly has non-departmental budget timeframes where we discuss, giving to other entities with larger budgets. That would be more appropriate for awarding it at that time rather than for the mini grant. So This is in the interest of maybe not having people waste their time on applications that maybe don't meet with the program, and trying to clear that up for those applicants before they fill out those applications.
Vice Mayor Parker, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Whitney. Two additional things that the amendment to the mini grant program would do: it would remove the nonprofit requirement and allow other types of groups to apply for the mini grants. And then second, since we would eliminate having a committee making the recommendation, and the recommendations would come from the council itself, it would establish a process for the council to review and select mini grant recipients.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would wish to speak on this item? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone in the chambers that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I see no hands raised on Zoom, so the item is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I would like to move to amend the mini grant program policy attached to Resolution 2021-054 by substitution, and that has been distributed to council members.
Have a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ruffridge. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion to substitute? Seeing no objection, the mini grant program policy as attached has been amended by substitute mini grant program policy. Any other comments on this item? Mr. Chilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been somewhat involved in the mini grant committee discussions on this, and I do completely agree that it's kind of got a little bit run away, and we need to refocus it back to the original intent of it, which was small community projects. So I'm fully supportive of the elimination of grant eligibility for organizations that are running program, or organizations with operating budgets in excess of $100,000. I think that's completely reasonable. One concern I would have with this is the complete elimination of project eligibility with no consideration of the scale of the project. I think the majority of projects that we've seen requested probably do fall outside the intent of this program, and I think it would be reasonable to eliminate that. But I think it might be going a little bit too far to eliminate all project eligibility, because I think there is always going to be the potential for small little community projects that do bring value to our community. So one that comes to mind would be like Iron Mike. If we had a small community project that wanted to do a little memorial statue, I think our council should be able to award a $1,500 grant to support that statue development. Or maybe we had a couple artists that wanted to put up a mural in our community and get a paint project to do that mural on some building in town. I think that is absolutely within the original intent of our mini grant program. I'm trying to figure out how we can still kind of pursue the goal of this resolution without completely eliminating that. And I'm hoping this isn't too verbose, but I would propose an amendment to reinstate projects, but cap them at $10,000. So to that end, I would move to reinstate project and projects were referenced in the original language, but amend it to projects and projects under $10,000.
Is that a motion?
Yes. So basically, I'm not sure how to phrase it, but anywhere where the word project or projects was previously stripped, I'm moving to reintroduce that project or projects word, but project or projects under $10,000.
Have a second.
Second.
Mr. Carey. Any discussion? Call for the vote on the amendment.
Councilmember Carey.
Yes.
Chilson.
Yes.
Parker? No. Hutchings?
No.
Ruffridge?
No.
Nelson?
Yes.
Student Representative Knowles?
No.
You have 3 yes and 3 no votes.
No. The motion fails on a 3 to 4 vote. Any further discussion? We'll call for the roll on the,
A comment, Mayor?
go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. This is a work in progress, so, this was the original mini grant program that got formulated. This is making revisions, and we'll work through this process, and if we find that we still need to amend the mini grant program in the future, we have that ability to do that. When I look through the purpose of the mini grant program and your reference to Iron Mike, I see that as providing funding to a wide range of civic programs and services. So, it depends on how you define programs and services. So, so I see this as, like I said, it's something we've just been doing for the last couple of years. We know we need to make some changes and get the council more involved in the selection process. And as we start working through it, if we see we need to make additional amendments, let's do that.
Any other comments? All right, we'll call for the vote on the amended resolution.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Carey?
Yes.
Councilmember Chilson?
Yes.
Councilmember Parker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hutchings?
Yes.
Councilmember Ruffridge?
Yes.
Student Representative Knowles?
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Resolution 2021-054 passed on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, it is going to be mayor and council reports. So my comments tonight are, today is November the 10th. It is the Marine Corps birthday, the 246th birthday, and I personally don't feel a day over 245, so I wish my Marine Corps a happy birthday. The VA grand opening was delayed, the VA facility, I should say. The grand opening has been delayed. When I spoke with them yesterday, they're not sure exactly when this is going to happen, and it looks like it may end up going as far as into December before that happens. Tomorrow's Veterans Day, unveiling of the plaque at on the Iron Mike Monument at Soldotna Creek Park, and that's scheduled for 4 p.m. I hope to see some of you there, and hopefully there won't be too much snow on the ground. And then I will be attending, I'm looking at the last report that came through on COVID. It's good to see that the hospitalization numbers are starting to go down, but the infection rate is still quite high. But it's good to see that the hospital rates are going down. And I will be attending the AML in Anchorage next week, and then I'll be gone for 2 weeks on vacation. And for those 2 weeks, I'll pretty much be out of contact by by phone or text, but I can be reached, of course, by email at any time. And that's all I have. Next is council reports on boards and commissions. Soldotna Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. The Planning Commission met last Wednesday. They had a couple of replats that came before the committee. One, an airport lease that combined 2 H lots into one. And then the other was a replat of a property over in the Slycock Creek subdivision. Currently, they're thinking they might not be having a December meeting, so, but stay tuned. And also at the Planning Commission meeting was Mayor Whitney to thank the members of the Planning Commission for their time and dedication to the city of Soldotna. That's my report.
Any questions for Vice Mayor Parker? Thank you. The next one is Soldotna Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting. I attended that because I think Councilmember Rufford was watching Thursday night football that night. But Parks and Rec had a work session. They reviewed the policy on plants and decorations at the Memorial Park. This was a similar discussion that this council had, I'm going to guess, 2 years ago, pretty much over the same thing, is what it's allowed and what's not allowed. Their plans right now are looking to post more of the policy and procedure manuals that for the park around the Memorial Park, and then have what the rules are regarding plants and decorations around the cemetery, posting pictures of what is allowed and what is not allowed, and when items, and then telling them when items are taken down or removed by the staff, where they can be located, and then also an update of the rules packet showing examples, again, of what is allowed and what is not allowed. There was also a report on how well the parks did this year and what it was an awesome year, and that's the report that's in your packet. They did an outstanding job. Kudos to the Parks and Rec department and all the employees that work there. They do a fantastic job, and it shows by how much our parks are used by people from all over the state of Alaska. There was another presentation made by Joe Casheye, and it's about a request from the Rotary about putting a piece of art in the park, and well, Soldotna Creek Park. It would be something that probably wouldn't happen until 2023. They're working on getting funding through the Rotary, and it would be a similar piece of work, artwork that is currently at the Central Peninsula Hospital up on the roof area that you can see from some of the hospital rooms. It's a salmon, and I will pass along pictures of what is currently up there and what they're looking at possibly doing in the park. This is a long-term project, and if it did get funded, it would be up, of course, to the Parks and Rec Commission and the administration as to whether that could go in the park and where it would go in the park. So they're not looking, they're probably looking at maybe 2023 before this would come to fruition. And that is all I have on Parks and Rec. Now, let me find my script, whatever I did with it. Okay, moving on, next item on the agenda, the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Thank you to Andrew Carmichael for putting the campground memo together. And as you mentioned, I was able to share that with the council in the packet this week. Several of our city offices will be closed tomorrow for Veterans Day. So we will not be available tomorrow, but we'll be back at work Friday, and want to thank our employees and the community members who are veterans for their service. The following week, next week, I will be up at AML, though you might not see me much Monday and Tuesday. I think I'm going to focus my time Wednesday through Friday, which is when the Municipal Managers Association meets. So I'll be up there for at least half the week, but available in between sessions. I'm co-presenting to the managers on Thursday with Clinton Singletary, who's the statewide remote sales tax director. So Clinton's the head of the staff at AML that administers the statewide internet sales tax division. And as a member of that board, they asked us to present. So we'll be giving an update, and I'll be happy to share those slides with the council afterwards, after we put them together between now and Thursday. Other than that, I don't think I'll see everyone till after Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. And that concludes my report, though I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from the council for the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comments. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment? For those participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. App users by pressing the raise your hand button, and phone participants by dialing *9 on your telephone. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on Seeing none, looking at Zoom, I see no hands raised, so we will move on to council member comments. Councilmember Hutchings.
Well, I hope everybody enjoys the snow we're supposed to get tonight. They say 3 to 5 inches. It should be making it nice for cross-country skiing. And I just wanted to say I'm really pleased with the movement that we've been able to get on the Homeless Coalition. They have been working very hard, and it's something that we definitely need. And I certainly hope we won't be seeing people sleeping in porches this winter. We saw quite a bit of it last winter, and I'm hoping that this will eliminate this situation. And everybody have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Student Representative Knowles.
Our food drive has begun and will continue until November 23rd, and it's going to help 15 families this Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Some good presentations tonight. Certainly learned a lot about some different things and some of those things happening in our community. And I also want to say I'm glad we had good movement on our ordinance and we're able to receive some of those additional COVID funds. The walk-in operation. I think about every time I drive by in the evening, I see people in there, and that's a really a very good service for our community and for the surrounding folks. So very happy to see that, and that's it.
Mr. Ruffridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, just a brief update on said clinic. The hours for that did expand this week to opening at 10 a.m. It's there till 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then Saturday from 10 to 4. Pediatric vaccines are currently available, as well as all of the other standards that are down there. We did get some help this week, and they will be there through the end of the year from some of the nursing staff that the state was able to obtain. So we were able to expand utilizing some of those nursing staff that are here in the Gulf Coast area. On the Thanksgiving note, all of these nurses that I've met thus far are here without their families. Most of them are from places that have never seen snow. Jacksonville, Florida, a lot of them, and I could not imagine that shock. But they have a great attitude and they're happy to help. And if you know anybody anywhere that needs some nurses and that want vaccines, they are here, and that's what they are designated to do, is to help. But yeah, they don't have a place to be for Thanksgiving. So if anybody is having a get together and wants a few nurses to hang out with, they just let me know, and we will find a place for them to have Thanksgiving. So thank you guys for a good meeting, and happy Thanksgiving if I don't see you before then.
Mr. Chilson.
Just say drive safe out there. That's it.
Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Kenai Peninsula has a very large number of veterans who live here. I don't know if it's still as it was a few decades ago, where per capita we had the most of anywhere in the country. I certainly want to praise all those who have served and all those who are certainly currently serving. One of the greatest unmet need for those who have been veterans is full access to mental health. I watched a program last night that said we've had 3 times more suicides than casualties from those Middle East confrontations. We need to listen more, and we need to speak less. And I certainly want to say to all of our veterans, thank you.
Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I too want to say thank you to all the veterans who have served our country, and that includes my oldest brother, who was in the U.S. Navy for many years. I too will be at AML next week with Councilmember Hutchings, Mayor Whitney, and City Manager. The pictures of the salmon that were sent around by Mayor Whitney. Just so you know, that salmon was designed and constructed out at Kenai Peninsula College by Cam Choi. So Cam has done great work there, and glad to see that. And last but not least, happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and be safe.
Next item on the agenda is executive session, and there is none, no reason for one this evening. Next one is meeting announcements, and before I get into that, I just wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. For those nurses, I would be more than happy to invite them to Thanksgiving dinner down in Mexico, where I'll be at. I'm sure they might enjoy that warmer weather. And the next meeting will be December 1st, 2021, City Council meeting at 6 p.m., and I will not be there for that, so Vice Mayor Parker will be handling it. And seeing nothing else before us, meeting's adjourned.